A woman's desire, a husband's decision, and a maid caught in the midst of their tangled emotions. Would you be angry at your husband if he lied and told people you were his sister, not his wife? And what if you told him to sleep with your maid, and he did? Would you be angry at your maid as well? Would you be even more angry that the maid conceived the child you could not? Hi everyone, my name is Penny Jane, and I'm here to bring you another Bible story of how crime, wars and sin all started. Abraham and his wife Sarah were true followers of God. They loved him with all their hearts. So when Abraham, who was 75 years old at the time, was told to leave his home, his family, and leave without knowing where he was going, he followed God without question. And for doing this, God said he would make him a great nation and bless him. Plus, God also said he would bless those who would bless Abraham and curse those who cursed him. So, Abraham and Sarah set off, taking all that they had, plus taking along his nephew Lot. They have no idea where they're going, but as they approached a land that God had chosen for them, they would stop and pitch their tents. Once God was done with them at that location, he would tell them to move on to the next destination, and so on. They would stop and set up their tents and their altar for worship, and then move on. And each place they would go, they would end up acquiring slaves and others who attached themselves to him for provisions and protection. The first place they stopped was called Shechem. God appeared to Abraham and said, "To your descendants I will give this land." It was a huge property that was beautiful. It was the land of milk and honey. So after being there a while, the time came, and they left there and continued their journey until they finally arrived in Egypt. So here's where Abraham makes a bad decision. Just before he enters the city, he tells Sarah, his wife, "If anyone asks you, you are my sister and not my wife." Because of her beauty, he was afraid they would take her and kill him. And sure enough, when they entered the city, there happened to be some princes of the pharaohs that saw her. They thought she was drop-dead gorgeous, so they took her to the pharaoh's house. And they treated Abraham very well as a result, given he was the brother. They gave him all kinds of livestock and female servants. But then God plagued the pharaoh because he had Sarah in his house. So the pharaoh learns that he's plagued because of Sarah. So he calls for Abraham and he questions him. "What is this you have done to me? Why did you not tell me she was your wife? I might have taken her for my wife. Now take her and go with all that you have." So they leave, and Lot leaves with them. They head south with all of Abraham's riches, which include livestock, silver, and gold. He was a very, very wealthy man. They continued to go south to as far as Bethel. Abraham set up his tent and lived by the terebinth trees of Mamre, which are in Hebron, and he built an altar there to the Lord. Then Abraham had a vision, and in that vision he asked the Lord about having a child, because up to this point he and Sarah had yet to have any children. So the Lord tells him he will have a child from his own body. Then he took him outside and said, "Look now toward heaven, and count the stars if you are able to number them." He said to him, "So shall your descendants be." As time goes by and 10 years pass, Abraham and Sarah still have no children. So Sarah, who has an Egyptian maidservant named Hagar, tells Abraham to sleep with her maidservant so she can obtain a child that way. So here's another bad decision Abraham makes. Just like Adam obeying his wife's bad idea, Abraham does this thing. He gets Hagar the maidservant pregnant. And anyways, she tells Abraham, "How could you have done this thing to me? And now my maidservant thinks, because you gave her a child, she is better than me." So Abraham tells her, "Deal with your maidservant as you wish." So Sarah becomes very mean to Hagar, so much so that Hagar runs away. Hagar makes it to some spring water in the wilderness, where an angel of the Lord finds her. And he says, "Hagar, Sarah's maid, where have you come from, and where are you going?" She said, "I am fleeing from my mistress Sarah." Then the angel of the Lord said, Return to your mistress and submit yourself under her hand." He continued, "I will multiply your descendants exceedingly, so that they shall not be counted for multitude." And then he told her, "Behold, you are with child, and you shall bear a son. You shall call his name Ishmael, because the Lord has heard your affliction. He shall be a wild man. His hand shall be against every man, and every man's hand against him, and he shall dwell in the presence of all his brethren." So she returned and had a son that Abraham, who was 86 years old at the time, named Ishmael. When Abraham turned 99 years old, the Lord appeared to him and reassured him of the covenant he had made with him, telling him he would be the father of many nations. God, at this point, named Abraham, Abraham, because until this point, Abraham's name had been Abram. Abram means exalted father, and Abraham means father of a multitude. God also changes Sarah's name, her name having been Sarai until this point. Both Sarah and Sarai mean princess, but changing her name at this point, even though they have the same meaning, brought her into the Lord's covenant as well. Also, God tells Abraham, "My covenant, which you shall keep, between me and you and your descendants after you. Every male child among you shall be circumcised. He who is 8 days old among you shall be circumcised, and any male child that is not circumcised shall be cut off from his people, because he has broken my covenant." Then God said, "As for Sarah, I will bless her and give you a son by her. Then I will bless her, and she shall be a mother of nations. Kings of peoples shall be from her." Then Abraham laughed and said to himself, "Shall a child be born to a man who is 100 and to a woman who is 90 years old?" Then Abraham said to God, "That Ishmael might live before you." Then God answered and said, "No, your wife Sarah will give you a son, and you will call him Isaac. I will establish my covenant with him and his descendants after him. Isaac will be born to Sarah at this time next year. As for Ishmael, I will bless him, and he will be fruitful and multiply, and he will have 12 princes, and he will be a great nation." Then God finished speaking to him and left. And Abraham did as the Lord instructed and was circumcised. And then he circumcised his son Ishmael, who was 13 at the time, and all the men of his house. And with this he sealed his covenant. Abraham one afternoon was sitting in the doorway of his tent when he noticed 3 men standing out front. So he went over to them and, according to their customs, bowed to the ground and told them, "Please let me wash your feet and bring you some food to eat while you rest under the tree." And they said, "Very well." So Abraham ran into the tent and told Sarah to quickly make supper for them. When she finished cooking, he took the meal over and gave each one of the men a plate of food to eat. He then stood close to them and waited for them to finish. Once they completed their meals, they said to him, "Where is Sarah, your wife?" So he told them she was in the tent. Now the Lord tells him he is going to have a son. You see, the men were 2 angels and the Lord, and they came to speak with Abraham. And Sarah was listening at the tent door. And when she heard the Lord say she was going to have a son, she laughed to herself and thought, "Yeah, right, after we're both so old." And the Lord said to Abraham, "Why does she laugh, saying, 'I'm too old to have a child'? Is anything too hard for me?" Then, of course, Sarah denied that she laughed, because she was afraid of getting into trouble. But the Lord said, "But you did laugh." He said to Abraham, "At the appointed time I will return, and Sarah will have a son." So, a year later, as the Lord promised, Sarah gave Abraham a son, and they named him Isaac, as the Lord instructed them to. The name Isaac means laughter. Sarah said, "God makes me laugh, and all who hear will laugh with me." Then when Isaac was 8 days old, Abraham took and circumcised him as God had commanded. Abraham was 100 years old, and both were overjoyed and pleased to finally have the child God had promised them. Now, as Isaac was growing, Sarah weaned him, and Abraham had a feast that day. At the feast, Sarah noticed Ishmael, Abraham's son with the maidservant, picking on Isaac. This infuriated her. So She went to Abraham and told him that Hagar and her son had to leave and never come back. So this broke Abraham's heart. So God said to him, "Don't let it break your heart. Listen to your wife Sarah, and don't worry about the maidservant and your son, because I will take care of them and make a nation of him because he is your son." So, first thing in the morning, he gave Hagar some bread and a skin of water and handed her the boy and sent her away. So she left and wandered in the wilderness of Beersheba until she was out of food and water. She then placed the boy under a bush and went down and across from him to sit and cry out, because she couldn't stand to watch him die. And God then heard the voice of the child, and an angel of God called out to Hagar from heaven and said to her, "What ails you, Hagar? Fear not, for God has heard his voice, so pick him up and hold him, for I will make him a great nation." Then God opened her eyes, and she noticed a well of water. So she went over and filled up the skin and gave it to the boy to drink. God was with the boy as he grew and lived in the wilderness of Paran. He became a great archer, and his mother Hagar chose a wife for him from the land of Egypt. And as God promised, Ishmael became a father of a great nation. Abraham's second son, and only heir, Isaac, followed in Abraham's footsteps throughout most of his life, even having a wife who could not bear children, and through prayer and faith, she too was able to conceive. And from each of his wives, his sons became the leaders of Israel's tribes. He inherited Abraham's wealth and was a successful farmer and shepherd, and like his father, had the favor of God on his life and was a blessing that extended to all nations.